Hello and welcome to my Fate Grand Order Servant tier list. This tier list is a bit different than others, so this is not a farming tier list. Instead, this tier list will focus on boss fights, exhibition quests, challenge quests, CQ for short, super recollection quests. Basically anything you can call hard content in Fate Grand Order is taken into account here. And I will rank every servant in the game based on how well they perform in these fights. This list will also be new player friendly. It is a bit more geared towards any players that have been playing for less than, let's say, 6 months or maybe even less than a year. Basically, I assume you have none of the meta supports, none of the limited 5 stars, and you just have a decent roster of 3 stars and low stars. This means no double Castoria, no double Skadi, no double Koyan Light. I assume you have none of them. Of course, you are allowed to pick a friend support and pick one Castoria. Now, why should you listen to me? What's my source? Well, my source is that I've been playing Fate Grand Order for the last 5 years. I have not missed a single day, and I am a hardcore player. And what do I mean by hardcore player? Well, that means I've cleared every content that has ever been available in the past 5 years, including any of the hard fights, any event, any new game mode, like the Grail Front, everything. Now, I know some of you might say that's nothing special. Most Fate Grand Order players have already done that, right? Well, I believe my perspective is a bit more unique than most because I've been playing all of the hard fights and boss fights in general with a couple of restrictions and rules that most people don't, I would assume. Number one, no command spells, no revives for any hard fight. This is a pretty common one. I would say most people do have this rule anyway because they don't like using command spells. Number two, you always pick story support. You're always forced to pick story support. If the game gives you a story support when you're about to go into a fight, you must pick it. You don't have a choice. If the game does not give you a story support at all, then you're free to pick whatever you want. Number three, I play the game with a ban list because some servants are simply too strong. And this is the ban list. Basically, it consists of every overpowered support you can think of, and some overpowered DPSs as well. And the list is technically longer because I do not own every single servant in the game. But you get the idea. And the final rule is no Black Grail, pretty self-explanatory. I'm not allowed to use Black Grail because I think it's simply too overpowered. The damage buff is insane, and the demerit is usually not very impactful, so it really is an insane craft essence. Heaven's Fields is fine, any other craft essence is fine. And it's because of those rules that push me to be more hardcore. I believe they make me more qualified than most for ranking servants, specifically for boss fights. And it should be obvious, but just to make it clear, these restrictions will not apply to this tier list. I just wanted to explain what my experience with the game was like. An interesting note, there was one fight that I could not beat with all of those restrictions, and that's the hardest fight in the game, the Berserker in Lost Spell 6. I'm sure everyone knows which one I'm talking about. I am not Honako Green, sadly, so I did need to use Castoria in that fight, so I broke my own rule. Okay, now before we move to the actual ranking, I want to explain the rules of this tier list and what the tiers mean and context in general. As I've already said, this is a CQ tier list, not a farming tier list, so you might see some good farmers lower than you would see in other lists. And once again, I assume you have none of the OP supports, no double Castoria, no Scadis, and I do assume you are a newish player. Of course, you are allowed to pick one from the friend support list, so one is allowed. Number 3, I assume you have no command codes or very little. You probably have the common ones that you get from the FP gacha, and maybe you got some from Dents, but more or less I assume no command codes. Number 4, and this is an important one, party cost matters. So rarity determines your party cost in a team. And let's give an example here. Let's say Fergus and who should I pick? Arthur. So let's say they are both Buster DPS with relatively strong crits and some NP damage. Now let's say, for example, they do the same amount of damage. If that's the case, then Arthur will be placed lower than Fergus, because even though they do the same damage, Fergus' party cost is much lower and therefore more valuable in a team. This is very important because even to this day, you cannot fill an entire team with 5 stars and 5-star craft essences. You simply do not have the party cost for that. And if you're a newish player, then your party cost will be lower than most, so this is even more important for you. And finally, I will assume some stats for the servants. I will assume NP1 with 1 append for 5 stars, NP1 with 1 append for 4 stars, though for some 4 stars I might mention NP2, because I do think it's not that hard to get NP2, a certain 4 star, so if he gets significantly better with NP2, I think it would be a shame not to reflect that in the tier list. 3 stars, 2 stars and 1 stars are of course NP5 with 4 appends. I will not assume all of the appends are unlocked. But I do assume you have lower NP levels for story locked, maybe even NP1 for most story locked. I do assume that your skills are at least level 6, and the best skill of the servant is maxed out, because it is very important to max out skills, lowers cooldown, increases effectiveness. And it's not written here, but I assume that your DPSs have max attack foes, and your supports have max HP foes, silver foes, that is the 3-star foes. And of course, I assume every servant is max level with no grails. Now, some might say, if this is a new player friendly, then why do I assume max level? Honestly, even for new players, it's very easy to max out a servant. Obviously, you will not max out everyone, but your main DPS will of course be maxed. Okay, and one last thing before we begin the ranking is, what do the tiers mean? And I'm sure some of you might ask, why are there so much top heavy rankings like S+, NDX? Is that not redundant? I will address it soon, but first let me explain what every tier means. D and C are the low tiers. I think the servants there are too weak to be used in any boss fight. They have too many issues and you need too many workarounds to get them started. So basically I do not recommend raising or using these ones. B is the threshold which I believe you start being usable. You can use these servants, though just barely. Maybe they have some niche. Even though they are kind of the bottom of the barrel, they can still shine in the right circumstances. B+ is similar to B, but simply better. A, we start getting into the good servants. I think they're overall good, and you can use them quite frequently and get the job done. A+ is similar, just better. S is the strong tier. You are always glad to have these servants. They will not let you down. Basically, there is no reason to ever remove them for the party if you need the specific class. And S plus is the best of the class. You can't go much higher than this. Now I'm sure you will ask, if this is the best of the class, then what's up with EX tier? EX is also the best of the class, but there is a differentiation here. EX is an exception. It's for the servants that are so good that they sort of transcend their own class. What do I mean by that? Well, it means you can even use them in neutral and they will still be very, very strong. Basically, the servants in X tier can carry you throughout, I would say, 90% of the game single-handedly, which is why I think they deserve a tier of their own. And now to address why the ranking is so top-heavy, that is because I believe this game is easy, and therefore most servants, even the weaker ones, are still usable. So almost every servant will be P and above, and that means I need more tiers to differentiate between the bad ones and the good ones. C and D are not going to be very populated. They are the ones I do not recommend using, as I said earlier, but there's actually not that many. For some classes, this will even be entirely empty. And final thing before we start, I want to thank Ratentaisou for the NP damage spreadsheet. It has been very useful. It provides a very good insight and perspective for how well the servants perform even without any external factors like supports and all that stuff. This spreadsheet also includes all of the Japanese servants and all of the JP buffs. Sadly, I do not play JP. I am an NA player, so that means I will only rank the NA servants. But I will include the JP buffs because I believe I can get a good estimation on how good their ranking is, even with a buff I cannot test out. I will include the list in the description if anyone wants to check it out. Highly recommend it. I will try and be brief with every servant because we have a lot of servants. I am doing all of the classes. I will try not to spend more than about half a minute for every servant. For the X ones, maybe I might talk a bit more, but that's about it. And before we begin, a small disclaimer. I will try my best to be as objective as possible, but at the end of the day, this is a tier list. Tier lists are subjective, so you might say I might find the servant to be here. It's possible that they actually might be a step up or a step down, but I will, in theory, you cannot put them 2 steps below or 2 steps above. If that happens, that my estimation has failed. And that's everything. We can finally begin. Alright, first up we have Jason, the 1-star, B tier. I don't know why he doesn't have a bronze border. This is, by the way, a tier list from Mist. Thank you, Mist, for the tier list. It's pretty useful. Yeah. Jason is decent for his 1-star rarity, but nothing spectacular. Can generate some crit stars, can give some support and deal a little bit of damage, but nothing insane. B tier. Next up is Caesar. Caesar is B+, pretty good damage, single target damage with his Noble Phantasm. But besides that, nothing else. Gilles Saber, D tier. I think he is pretty bad. Even though he had a buff recently, I don't think that's enough. He still needs a lot of help in order to be even worth considering. Bedivere. Bedivere is A tier. He's pretty good for a 3-star, has some defenses and pretty good damage. Fergus. Fergus is A+. I believe he's the best 3-star or low rarity in general Saber. Pretty good damage, good buster crits, very good defenses, evade and defense up. And buffed NP, and of course the free NP5 also helps. Artoria Alter, or Salter as some people like to call her. A+, she's pretty good, especially after her buff. Pierce Invul, good NP damage, but her basic attacks do lack some punch. Artoria Lily, D tier. She's pretty bad, not good damage, no tankiness, she just can't do much of anything, sadly. Nero Saber 4-star, S+. I think she's the best 4-star Saber, especially after the buff. She is really good at soloing, really good damage, very, very, very tanky, like all those guts and defense up and heals. She's just great. I don't see how you can go wrong with Nero Saber. Siegfried, B+. He can deal some good damage, and if he's fighting a dragon, then he's basically A+ or even S, but that's not that common, so B+ is the highest I can go. Chevalier Deon, B+, decent tank, but a slightly expensive tank, 4-star. He's basically there to taunt for 3 turns, apply and evade, and then stall for your DPS to kill the enemy. Rama, B. Rama is pretty weak, even for a 4-star. He is barely worth raising, in my opinion. His buffs do help. He can deal decent damage in the ideal scenarios, but he's definitely not my go-to Saber. Lancelot Saber, A+. He's pretty good at looping, pretty reliable single target damage, but no defenses, and the basic attacks are not that impressive. They're just there for helping him loop, basically. Gawain, A. He's pretty good after the buffs, can serve as a buster crit DPS and sometimes reasonably strong NP, but he lacks defenses. He has only 1 guts, which is only 1 turn from what I remember, which is pretty pathetic. Ellie Saber, C. She's not worth raising, though I can see how in the future, maybe with 1 more buff, she can maybe slide into B tier, but right now I don't think she's worth raising. Suzuka Gozen, A+. She's pretty good, has a little bit of everything, some good damage, good defenses with the charm and attack down, but she doesn't excel at anything, which is why she's not higher. Frankenstein, B tier. She can do the job as a DPS, but just barely, and you need some good RNG, and you need to help her survive, so B tier is as high as I can go. Yagyu Munenori, S tier. He's really good at single target spam, Noble Phantasm spam. Constantly applying debuffs, really good damage, has defenses too, but you do need a little bit of supporting to get him to loop, which is the reason why I don't place him higher, but he's really good. You can't go wrong with Munenori. Queen Mev Saber, B tier. She can be a decent support by buffing your allies and debuffing your enemies, though the debuffs do fail sometimes, which is very frustrating. Also, forget about using her as a DPS, her damage is just not good. Diarmuid, A tier. He's pretty good in general, decent all-rounder, decent damage, decent defenses, similar to Suzuka, but he's a bit worse in the damage department, that's why he's lower. Prince of Lanling, A+, pretty good support, gives good buffs, arts up and attack up is always useful, and he can also protect himself, pretty self-sufficient, I would say. Lakshmi Bai, one of my favorites, S tier. She's really good at survival, decent damage as well, can function as both DPS and support, very good all-rounder, though the reason why she's not higher is because her damage is not top tier, but she's still really strong in my opinion. Katsushika Hokusai, S tier. She's similar to Munenori in the sense that she can loop very well, very good damage as well. And she's a free NP5, so that's something she has over Munenori. Tomoe Gozen, A+. She can be good at crit DPSing and somewhat a good looper, but she doesn't reach the power level of the others. She's still pretty good though. Saido Hajime, S tier, similar to the other two arts loopers, single target arts looping. He can loop pretty easily, really good damage, but he does need a little bit of supporting to get going, stack those debuffs. Also, I should mention, if you get Munenori or Saito at NP2 or maybe even higher, NP3, 4, 5, then they have the potential to be S+. Watanabe no Tsuna, B+. His damage is a bit on the lower side, but he does have some useful utility which keeps him a bit higher than others. And also he has a specialty against Oni and Demonic, which tend to be Berserker. So if you happen to find one of those, his damage will be more than enough. Santa Karna, S tier. His damage is really good. Really good crits, generates a lot of crit stars, really good NP as well. Good NP gain, all around just great. He won't let you down. Karna he's great. Barguest, S. Similarly, she's really good. Constantly removing buffs from the enemy, applying defense down, constantly gaining HP herself. She's great, but she does have a weakness against single target NPs. She has no hard defense, and so if she gets hit once, usually it's enough to knock her out. Roland, S tier. Surprisingly, he's really good. Great damage, great survivability, really good survivability actually. And AoE buff removal on 6-turn cooldown is kind of insane, so that earns him a high spot. Gareth, B tier. She's pretty well known for not being great in the community. Her damage is okay though, at the very least. I think she can function as a DPS at the very least. Yamanami Keisuke, B+. He's an okay support, definitely not on the tier of Landling. A lot of his, not a lot, just his NP buffs are tied to Shinsegumi group, which is not ideal because you're not always gonna pair him up with Shinsegumi. Alright, time for the 5 stars. Artoria Pendragon, S tier. Her damage is great, high tier damage for sure. She can easily chain busters because of her second ability that turns all her cards into buster. NP damage is great as well, kind of spammable as well. Yeah, high tier damage all around. Just the issue is she has no hard survivability, which is the reason why she's not even higher. Altera, A+. Good damage, some decent survivability with heals, and some utility with removing enemy buffs. But nothing's truly special, which is why she's stuck in A+ and not higher. Arthur, B+. His recent buff helped him a lot to solidify himself as a sort of buster crit DPS. His busters do hit a lot, really hard right now. But his NP, even though the damage is okay of his NP, he can't really loop it, he can't gain it very easily, and you're not really gonna use K-scope on him or anything like that, so... And in here, his buster crits are only 2, he has only 2 busters, which is why he's not... He just doesn't function all that well. Mordred, S+. Really good damage, top tier damage I would say. Really hard hitting crits, hard hitting NP, has bonus damage on the Artoria servants, which do pop up quite often actually, and some decent survivability with her defense up. Nero Saber 5-star version, S+. She can function as both single target DPS and as support, and she does both great. Like, she's great at both of those, which is why she's in such a high tier. Ryugi Shiki, A+. She can't loop, even though she's an AoE arts, she cannot loop. But her damage is good. She has good heals. 5k heal is nothing to laugh at. Has a battery too, so she works, but she's not a high tier. Miyamoto Musashi. Might be a hot take, but EX tier. I think she's the best Saber right now. Her solos are truly top tier. Very high utility. Very high damage. Totally spammable NP, like you can back-to-back NP 3 times with ease, which says a lot. But I will say it was a hard decision between EX and S+. It wasn't a clear EX. Sigurd, A tier. He can do some good crits and high single target damage with his NP. But getting him to crit is not the easiest thing. He does need some supporting, which is what keeps him on the lower than S tier, an A+. He's still decent. He's still higher than Arthur, I would say. Benienma, S+. Really good utility. The buff removal resist, the team-wide buff removal resist has saved me multiple times. Provides a lot of utility for the team, attack up, NP gain, NP seal on the enemies. Can do good damage herself, has arts up, an NP with super effective against chaotic and evil. Good hit counts, quick is 6 hits, which is great. Overall, really strong. You can't really go wrong with Benienma. Astolfo Saber, A+. Surprisingly really good survivability with stun and evade hit-based evasion. His damage is a bit all over the place. You need the Buster crit to do a big burst. But it's not mandatory. You can still kind of spam the NP, but the weird Buster mechanic with only one Buster is what keeps him at lower than S rank. Dioscuri, S tier. They're strong, pretty strong, but not top tier strong. My opinion of them has diminished over time. Like a few years ago, I would place them as plus, but I think their damage is just not there. Utility is good, but some abilities are a bit weak, especially the second one. Second ability is just weak. But they're still strong. You're not gonna be sad if you use Dioscuri. Ibuki Doji. Now, contrary to Dioscuri, her opinion has not diminished. She is S+. Really good damage. Pierce Invul and Pierce Defense is a strong combo. Pretty much means unavoidable damage, which is always nice. Triple Buster to get Buster Chains, good crits, high attack, high battery. Has strong passives with Damage Cut and Buster Up. Really good servant. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the Dioscuri do have the same Pierce Invul, Pierce Defense that Ibuki also has, but her damage is better, which is why she's higher on the list. Alright, so a slightly controversial servant, Senji Muramasa, S tier. I think he's a good looper, has great damage, great crits, great utility, but I feel like he needs support to do what he's supposed to do, and if he gets hit a bit too much with, I don't know, 2 crits or something, he just dies, no hard survivability. So these weaknesses, I feel like, do keep him from truly being top tier. Next up, Okida Soji Saber. S+. I know some people probably expected EX, and I was debating for a while whether I should put here EX or S+. But I think at NP1, and no grails, of course, her damage is not quite top tier. She does need a little bit of help, some quick buffs, attack up, or NP damage up to truly get that top tier damage. Of course, if you manage to get NP2, she is immediately X tier, but for now, S+. Charlemagne, S+. His damage is great, top tier even, I would say. His kit is a little bit all over the place, but it works. It works. If you can manage to stack the king buff, then you can get really good damage, and he also has hard survivability, a little bit of supporting your team. He's great. Trunk Sisters, S tier. They're pretty similar to Dioscuri. I think Trunk Sisters are better though than Dioscuri. They provide a lot more utility. Healing up, buster up, attack up for the team, crit resistance, buff removal resist. In some sense, they are similar to Benienma, but their damage is not quite at that level, even without niches, the chaotic and evil. Benienma is still better damage-wise, which is what's keeping them from being S+ tier, though it's pretty close, I would say. You can argue they are S+, but I'll put them at S. And that's it for the tier list and the small sneak peek. I would say, I haven't played with Medusa, but I would say she's probably S+, but I'm not gonna place her because I haven't played with her at all, because she's not out yet. After thinking about a bit more, I think I will make one change, especially when comparing Muramasa to Ryugi Shiki. I don't think she's that weaker than Muramasa. They should be on the same tier, I believe. They both are AoE arts. Muramasa is more spammable, but Ryugi Shiki is definitely more damage. With her NP, has way higher damage. Better uptime as well. Shiki's abilities have better uptime. 5k heal is also really strong, but they both lack hard defenses. It depends on the situation, but I think they should be on the same tier. So yeah, Ryugi Shiki gets an increase to S tier. And I think that should be the last change, the only change. Okay, moving on to the Archer tier list. Despite having a 0.95 damage multiplier, you still have some good DPSs here. And starting off with Arash, S tier. He is a 1-star. I don't know why he has a gold border. Once again, this is a tier list from Mist. Thank you, Mist. But he's a 1-star. His damage, despite being a 1-star, is great, really good with the NP. He sacrifices himself, but that actually is not a big demerit, because sometimes in some fights you do want a fast nuke right away to take out some of the more weaker enemies or lower HP enemies, and then move on to the second phase of the boss fight, or so on and so forth. So he's really good. Arash will not disappoint you. Oda Nobukatsu, B tier. Some decent buffs, but some of the buffs are locked behind Oda Nobunaga specific requirements, so only Oda Nobunaga can get the full benefits of the buffs, which is what pushes him lower, but he's still decent for a cheap buster support option. Paris, also B tier, can do some great damage actually with his NP, but nothing else besides that. That's why he is lower on the tier list, but he can still work and he is a cheap option, so he's good. Robin Hood, A+, really good damage with his Noble Phantasm. You just need to poison the enemy, which is a very easy thing to do because he has poison himself. Has some decent defenses, and P gain is low though, that's why he's not higher on the list, but still really good 3-star. Uriel, the best 3-star in the Archer class, S+. She is your best option against male Sabers in general, even outside of 3 stars. She is quite ridiculous. She can charm the enemy, attack down, loops fairly decently well. Damage is really good against male Sabers, so yeah. You will definitely need her for some fights if you are a free-to-play player. David, A+. His damage is nothing special, but his survivability is pretty good, and more importantly, he helps the team survive, which is the reason why he's so high up. And of course, his cheap party cost helps with that as well. Kid Gilgamesh, C tier. His damage is not great. He needs some buffs in order to be viable. He can charm humanoid enemy, which every servant in the game counts as humanoid, which is good. But I don't think he does enough for you to use him in a team. Billy the Kid, A+, another great 3-star. Really good damage. He can deal a huge crit burst turn for only one turn, but it's still a big turn. NP damage is also great, has a pretty big battery as well. NP gain is okay, and crit star generation is not good with his 2-hit quick cards, but with his recent buff, he has a star bomb, so he gets the A+. Tawara Tota, A tier. His damage is low, but despite that, he is fairly tanky and can provide some good buffs for your team. William Tell, also A tier. He has good damage, or I should say excellent damage if your opponent has an evade. But if they don't have an evade, damage is not that great. Also, no survivability, which is why he gets placed lower than Billy the Kid, in my opinion. Emiya Archer, A+. Some might be a bit surprised that he's not higher, but I think his deck is holding him back. Tribal Arts does not combo well with his kit at all. His abilities are great, but NP gain is not good. Quick card is only 2 hits, so NP duration is also not great. Only if you use Noble Phantasm with your second ability, you can generate some good crit stars. Crits hit really hard, but only one buster, which once again is the problem of his deck. NP also is not that impressive. If you turn it into arts for one time, you basically loop, but that's only once, and that's not that amazing. But he's still pretty strong. Would still recommend. So yeah. Atalante, B tier. I was thinking of placing her C tier because she is quite weak nowadays. Very weak actually, but she is one of the few quick supports in the game, which is very hard to find. And that for me is reason enough to push her up from C to B tier. Oda Nobunaga, A tier. His damage is good. He has specialty against Divine and Riding's enemies, which actually happen to be Sabers quite a lot of the time. Some Sabers even have both Divine and Riding, in that case, he basically deals single target damage. Yeah, as I said, damage is good, but he has no defenses, and that's a bit that is holding him back a bit, which is why he's not higher. Tristan, S tier. Tristan is great for team supporting, also great for DPSing, has plenty utility, really good all round. He's great. You should raise him. And Bonnie and Mary Reed, B+. Damage is okay and sometimes can be good if you can get her to be low HP, can get them to be low HP. But defenses are not great, and overall nothing amazing about their kit, so I can't give them any higher than that. Chloe von Einsberg, also known as Kuro, S tier, great single target looper, free NP5 helps a lot, has some defenses as well, overall great. Emiya Alter, A tier. Surprisingly very high single target damage, but his abilities are just bad. They kind of suck. NP gain is not great. He also has RNG in his NP, which you hate to see it. So despite having decent defenses and good damage, his numbers are still kind of low. So yeah. Helena Blavatsky, D tier. She is very weak. Abilities are some of the weakest in the game, honestly. NP is strong, but NP gain is bad. So you need a lot of work you need to put a lot of work in to make her do something. Tomoe Gozen Archer, A tier. Good damage, good survivability. Nothing amazing in either case, but still overall a good balance. Can do some crits as well, some star generation. Just a nice package, but nothing exceptional. Altera Archer, also A tier. Can provide some support for the team. Can also deal some good damage because of free NP5. But once again, nothing exceptional. Asagami Fujino, S+. Really good damage, very good survivability. NP hits really hard, has a special modifier as well if you happen to be fighting against a giant. Has good utility as well, just great overall, good NP gain, great numbers. She's really strong. Chiron, S tier. Strong support abilities, damage buffs are good, always good. Survivability is decent. His NP also hits fairly hard, so you can DPS if you want with him. But his support abilities are real, so he's high tier in my book. Ashwataman also S tier. Really good damage. If he gets low HP, damage skyrockets. He also has an invincible to help you control when he gets low and maybe stay low HP. Provides also some defense down and all sorts of buffs. Yeah, just really good damage. Osaka Hime Archer, B tier. She's weak, but not super weak. I think she's still usable, provides some utility for the team. Damage is not great, also a bit weird to use because you have to taunt the enemy to use one of her abilities, which could mess you up at times, but still okay, she can work. Calamity Jane, S tier, kind of similar to Chiron. She can do good damage and also provide good support for her team. Can be a bit weird to use because she has crit star requirements and also RNG in her star bomb, but I think she's fairly consistent and she's a high tier for me. Santa Nightingale, S tier. She's mostly support, more support than DPS, but she can DPS if you want, because she is a free NP5 after all. But the support utility she provides is fairly unique and pretty strong in my opinion, so she once again gets a high tier. Einsburn, 8 tier. She can do some good crit damage, and P damage is not high, but she has some survivability, a bit of utility. Nothing exceptional, but she's decent. Bavanchi or Fairy Knight Tristan, S+. My opinion is she's the strongest 4-star in the archer class, especially after her buff. Her damage is very high if you manage to stack curses, which is easy because of command codes. Survivability is really good. She can even solo a lot of the times. A lot of utility as well, can help the team survive. She's really high tier. Anastasia, archer, S tier. She's a great looper, has good damage and survivability, some utility as well, but her damage is not quite top tier. If you manage to get her to high NP level, she for sure reaches S+, but I'll leave her for S in S for now. Zenobia, also S tier. Once again, good damage, good survivability, but damage is not quite top tier. And her cooldowns do hold her back a bit. That first ability is quite a long cooldown, but she's still really strong. And now we reach the 5 stars, starting off with the famous Gilgamesh, and he gets EX tier. His damage is top tier. The only requirement you need for him to do his top tier damage is for you to fight servants, which is a very easy thing to do because most hard battles, most boss fights include servants, multiple ones even, which is exactly what he wants because he's an AoE. His numbers are great, hit counts are great, 5 hits all across the board, and P gain is good. Card generation is also good, star generation is good. He is only lacking hard survivability, but I think his damage is still EX tier worthy, which is why he is in that tier. And going from the best to sadly the worst 5-star, we have Orion, Artemis, B tier. She is, in my opinion, the worst 5-star in the entire game from any class, not just the archer class. Her only niche is against males, but Uriel does it way better, and is the reason why she is so low. Her damage is not great unless you're fighting against males. Survivability is okay, and P gain is bad, numbers are low. She just doesn't really do much. But if you really want to, she still works. That's why she's B tier and not lower. But I would not recommend raising her over Uriel ever. Nikola Tesla, S+, but I will say it was a very close call between EX and S+. Might still change it last minute to EX, but his damage is great. Survivability is amazing with the guts and defense up on low cooldowns. Has some team utility as well. Can stun the enemies, though it is RNG and kind of low RNG at that. But he's still really high tier. You could even say top tier. You could say he's EX. I wouldn't really refute that at all. But I will be placing him as plus for now. Arjuna, Archer, B+. I think he's a bit overhated in the community. He's not as bad as everyone says, but he's still not amazing. Damage and P damage is kinda good actually. His basic attack damage is not great though. He has some utility with 5-turn debuff immunity, and he can heal, can charge and P fairly easy, but overall his deck does hold him back with the 3 arts. I think that's a problem in general. Most archers that have a triple arts deck are weakened by their deck. Artoria Summer Archer S tier. Extremely spammable Noble Phantasm, but the Noble Phantasm itself is not the most damage dealing, not the highest damage. Still really good though, still very spammable. Damage on the basic attacks is a bit weak. Defenses are okay. I think you really want NP2 to get the damage going. That's why I place here on S instead of S+. Ishtar, S tier. Great damage, great crits, great support for the great damage buffs for the team as well. But here invincibility is RNG, which is very sad, honestly. And her third ability does need some getting used to be effectively used. But she's still solid. Moriarty, A tier. Once again, another triple arts deck, which is also bad in my opinion. Does not fit his playstyle at all. Has some utility, has some supporting ability as well. NP hits kind of good damage on his NP actually. His defense down is not guaranteed, sadly, because you're fighting Sabers. The defense down can fail a lot of the times. But he's still a decent support / DPS. Napoleon, A+. Good damage with a niche against the Divine, which is always good to see. Has good utility with Ignore Defense and Ignore Invincible, a great combo, as always. But he has no defenses, and despite saying all that, his damage is not the best, which is why he's not higher, but he's still pretty good. Jeanne d'Arc Summer, A+. Good damage, good defenses, but no utility, and damage is good, but not that amazing. I think the ones above do a better job. She can loop fairly easily though, which is why she gets relatively high tier. Super Orion, EX, and in my opinion the strongest archer in the game right now. His crits are insane, the best of the game. You can use him even outside of non-Saber fights, because his crits are that insane. You can easily one-shot bosses and bars and faces, so that's already enough for you to understand how powerful he is. And he also has some utility with the Pierce Invul and debuff immunity, so yeah, he will not let you down. Sei Shonagon, A+. Good damage, good defenses, some utility, good crits, but not exceptional at anything, which is why she's not higher. But you'll get some mileage out of here. Minamoto no Tametomo, A tier. He potentially has the highest damage out of everyone here if the stars aligned and you fulfill all of his niches and you let him charge his NP buffs. But that takes a lot of work and doesn't happen often, honestly. That's why he is pushed much lower. He can do some good buster crits, but that's not that consistent either. I wish he was better. I think he needs a buff, but you can still get some good damage out of him. And that's it for the Archer tier list. I do not think I'll be making any changes. You could argue maybe Zenobia should be a bit lower, because her damage is not that exceptional, or maybe Tesla should also be EX. That would be fair arguments, but I will remain like this. Okay, now we move on to the Lancer tier list. You're gonna know this more in the EX. We have some strong Lancers and a lot of the 4 stars being lower, but you will see soon. Marianning, B+. A decent support, though limited only to females. Can deal a little bit of damage, but don't expect too much. She is a low rarity after all, but she's okay. Musashibo Benkei, D. Sadly, he's not good at all, not worth raising. He's supposed to be a tank that debuffs the enemies, but there isn't even a guarantee that the debuffs work, so he's just bad. D. Leonidas, A. He's pretty good. I would say he's the best bronze Lancer. A good tank, can buff your team. If he gets to NP, he gets even tankier, taunts for even more turns, gets some crit stars. He's pretty good. Gareth, B. She's okay. She's also kind of a tank DPS, but she doesn't do either very well, so she's kind of stuck in this low tier. Okay, here we go. Kukulane, Lancer, EX. Maybe some new players are surprised by the ranking, but Ku is the best 3-star in the game. At least if we're talking about DPS and not support. He's very tanky, extremely tanky, with all the evades, the guts, and the low cooldowns. Deals pretty good damage, and his only weakness, in my opinion, was he has no crit damage, but now that the new appends are here, he even has the crit damage, so he has it all. EX tier. Now, contrary to the original Ku prototype is not EX. He's Honako Green probably isn't gonna agree with me, but I say B+. He's way less tankier than the original Ku because he has no guts, and that's very important to keeping him alive. And the trade-off is he deals more crit damage, but now that the appends are out, I don't think that's worth it at all. I think he's significantly worse than the original Ku when it shows in my tier list. The only upside to this Ku is if you're fighting Wild Beast, you do more damage. But even then, I don't think it's worth it because if you're tanky enough, you're gonna win anyway. So yeah, B+. Romulus, B+ as well. He has some tankiness, guts, defense up, heals, 2 heals. Damage-wise, he's not that great though, so that's why I can't go any higher. Though he does support the team a bit, can give Buster to others, so yeah, that counts as something. Hector, B. Hector is a bit weak, but not useless. Has some okay team buffs, NP damage up, damage cut. His NP can hit a bit hard, but nothing special. Diarmuid, B+. The buffs have been a bit kind to him. His damage is okay. He can deal some NP damage, some debuffs to the enemy. Card attacks, basic attacks are also okay, but nothing really special. Jaguar man, B+. Her crits, her Buster crits can hit really hard. But besides that, skill cooldowns are high, which is bad. Quick and art cards are not good. NP is also average at best. Maybe a little hard hitting at times, but nothing special. That's as high as I can go. Hozu in Inshun, B. He can function a bit as a solo, can do some nice crits, but you do need a lot of setup to even get him running, to get him to do stuff, so that's why he gets placed a bit lower. Elizabeth Bathory, B+. She is a decent support slash DPS, can buff your female allies, debuff the enemy. She can do some work, but her MP doesn't hit that hard, and she can fail some of the debuffs. Artoria Pendragon Lancer Alter. A. Her NP hits pretty hard. Crits are also pretty strong, but they are only there for one turn. And she has no defenses, which is what's keeping her from being higher. Fion, B+. An okay looper, you can kind of loop with some supports, though his damage is pretty bad. He can though serve as a tank with a taunt and evade, but he is a bit clunky. Li Shuen, B+. Very straightforward, just damage, press all buttons and deal a lot of damage on one turn, but after that one turn you don't really do much after that. Kiyohime, B+ as well. She has okay damage, fairly decent damage, but not really good at defenses and not really strong crits, nothing much really. Vlad, A+. He got one buff and that made him really good. He can now do some tanking, provide team buffs, really good damage by himself. His NP has an evil modifier and his damage does skyrocket a bit when you fight evil. Yeah, he's around pretty good. I think he's worth raising. Jean Lily Santa Lily, C. She has weak damage, weak utility, weak team buffs. Just in general, she's weak. I don't think she's worth raising, but she's not far from being useful if she ever gets another buff. Medusa Lily, or Lancer Medusa, B+. She has some utility with the stuns, quick down, but her NP gains are atrocious. She has some tankiness though, and damage is okay, but once again, nothing special. Raiko, A tier. She can deal some damage, though her uptime is not that good. She's a half DPS, half support. I think her supporting is a bit stronger than her DPSing, but she's useful, that's why she's on the A tier. Parvati, B+. Her NP is good, but her abilities are pretty weak, or I should say the uptime is not good. And despite me being a Sakura fan, that's as high as I can go. Neza, B tier. She has low numbers in general, low damage, no modifiers, low modifiers, very little utility, next to none. She needs help, but she's not useless. Her damage is barely passable, I would say. Valkyries, B+. Their damage is low, but they are rather tanky with the heals and evade and some damage cut, so they deserve at least B+. Ibaraki Doji, B. Her damage is low even though she is mainly just for DPSing. Uptime is not that good either. She doesn't do much in general, but I think she barely passes the bar. Qin Liangyu, A tier. I think her solos are pretty strong, and even in teams she can shine, though she is kind of hard to... It is a bit hard to make her work. You do need the ball to start rolling for her to start doing stuff. But I think she's still deserving higher than most of the B+. Nagao Kagetora, S tier. Free and P5 and the recent buff make her really strong. Pretty good looper. If you can manage to get some art basic attacks in, she can back-to-back NP. Damage is great. Provides some team support as well with the team buffs. Has some survivability as well. Yeah, all around she's strong. Meltrilis Lancer, S tier. Kind of similar to Kagetora, but the AOU version. She loops even better, has good survivability as well. Uptime on skill is so high that it even overlaps on her first skill. Good utility as well. Yeah, she is great overall. Though I will say you do kind of need NP2 for her damage to impress, but I think she's still S tier. Kainis, A tier. She has good damage and good survivability, but not great at either, and you do need a little bit of setup with the second skill to really ramp up the attack up and the attack down for the enemy. Also, you need to NP to get the crit damage, which sometimes is a bit awkward, which is why she's not even higher, but she's pretty good still. Utsumi Eris, or I should say Erise, B+. Her damage is okay, has a modifier against Servant, which helps. She can kind of loop as an AoE Arts looper. If you do proc death though, you don't get the refund, but usually in hard fights you don't actually proc death, so that shouldn't be a big issue for her. Survivability is okay, but her numbers in general are not that strong, that's why she's not higher. Yume Lancer, S tier, very strong welfare, free NP5, strong modifier against males, which is very easy to hit. She's fairly tanky with the low cooldown guts, 5 turn, 6 turn cooldown. Can provide some support for the team, good NP gain in general. She's great all around, highly recommended. Percival, also S tier. He is a very strong tank with heals, invincible, good tankiness in general, good damage as well. Can hit fairly hard even as a tank. Though outside of his NP, his arts card are very bad at giving him NP. His NP gain is very low, so you will have some trouble doing multiple NPs. He's still very strong though, that's why he's up there. Yeah, he's great. Don Quixote, B+. Sadly, even after the buff, numbers are pretty low. Damage is kind of low, not terrible, but modifier is not that useful usually against Supergiant. But it can be handy sometimes, but in general I think he needs a bit more to go higher. And now we're getting into the 5 stars, and we're starting off strong with Skathag at EX. Before her buff, probably she would be S+, but after that she's too strong, I think. The divine modifier is ridiculous. Her damage is so high, and divine modifier is easy to hit. Guaranteed stun on her NP. Has good crits as well, good survivability, just great in general. My only criticism is her quick cards are bad at NP gain, but that can be fixed rather easily because she also has batteries, and probably you will also use at least one support with her and she will win you the fight. Karna, A+. Karna hits pretty decently. I would say if you're hitting the Divine modifier, he's basically a single target, not even an AoE. If you're hitting 3 Divines, then even better. Damage is really good, crits are good, but NP gain is very low, like it's hard to get his NP, and he has no survivability, so he needs help on both sides, both survivability and NP gain, and NP battery. But his damage is real, that's why he's relatively high. Brynhild, also a plus. Damage is also really good, single target damage. Surprisingly, fairly easy to hit her niche, which is why her damage is so good. But once again, survivability is not great, and abilities are not that great either. At least she gains NP more easily than Karna, but yeah, damage is good, nothing else besides that. Artoria Pendragon 5-star Lancer. The lowest 5-star Lancer, in my opinion, at B+. She can deal good damage if she hits her modifiers, which is Evil and Chaotic. But besides that, she doesn't really do anything else. If she does not hit the niches, damage is not great. Utility is only on the Pierce Invul. No defenses, buff numbers are low, the charisma is low, and yeah, she just doesn't do much, sadly. Tamamo Lancer, A+. She also has a niche against males, similar to Yume Ren, but she is an NP1 and Yume Ren is NP5, so Yume Ren naturally does a lot more damage, which is why she's higher. But she can deal some good crits and she has some survivability, so she's pretty good. But I think Yume Ren is better as a free NP5. Enkidu, another EX tier. Enkidu is one of your best choices in the hardest fight in the game. That alone puts him pretty high in my list. But that's not the only reason. He's very tanky, 10k heal with low cooldown evade, which also applies crit down. Damage is surprisingly good, even though he has no DPS skills, aside from the first one, which is only 1 turn cooldown. But surprisingly, his NP hits really hard, and the defense down matters a lot, 30% before damage. Also, guaranteed stun on Divinity is really good, comes up pretty often. Yeah, you can definitely use Enkidu even outside of archers, which is why he's EX tier. Ereshkigal, the community's favorite waifu usually. Another EX tier, and this isn't even the last one. Ereshkigal is kind of insane really, provides so much buffs to the team. Attack up, defense up, some utility with buff removal resist, death resist. She also deals pretty good damage, good battery, very good NP gain on that arts card, might be the best NP gain in the game. If you crit, you might go from a 0 to 100, it's quite insane really. Yeah, overall I think she's insane. You basically use her in almost any fight, and she will do good stuff for your team. Bradamante, A+. The buffs have been helping her out a lot. She used to be bad, in my opinion, but now she's fairly good. Damage is good, nothing amazing, but she can deal damage. Utility is there, sadly not a guaranteed stun, but she provides team utility. She's good. Romulus Quirinus, S+, not quite the X tier, but he's still very strong. Damage is almost top tier. You do need to manage your Roman debuffs on the enemies to maximize damage, and you do need to crit in order to apply them. But that's not that hard to do, and also his crits are really good, so you want to crit anyway with him. Yeah, he's strong, and also fairly good survivability. But despite being a Grand Servant, he's not EX. Vritra, A+. I'm gonna be comparing her to Karna because I think they have a similar role in the sense that they both have a divine modifier. The difference is she provides the divine modifier to all her teammates, so she is more supportive in that sense. She has better defenses than Karna as well. NP is also way more spammable than Karna because she's an AoE arts, but her damage is much lower than Karna, which is why I think they balance out her positives, and that's why they are on the same tier. Melusine, and to no one's surprise, EX tier. Turns out when you can choose your damage type from single target to AoE, you get it all in one package. Skills are very strong, good defenses, good damage, good crits. She very good NP gain as well, very spammable single target NP. And when she turns AoE Buster, she also gains Ignore Invul. Very flexible, very good. You can use her basically anywhere. And if you happen to have only an arts buffer or only a Buster buffer, you can choose which one you prefer, and she still works. Sakamoto Ryoma Lancer, S tier. They have good damage, good utility, and good defenses. They have everything, but to get the defenses, the 50% defense up, you do need to NP, so you do need to time everything kind of nicely. Everything needs to line up. They're still a good package. Not quite S+, even though they're pretty close, and you can argue they are S+, but I will leave them in S tier. They're really strong though, you can't go wrong with them. And finally we have Britomart at A+. She's kind of similar to Bradamante in a lot of ways. Good defenses, good damage, and P gain is okay. Yeah, even though she looks good, she doesn't do anything exceptionally well, but she's still fairly strong. That's why she's high up there. And Bima, I haven't played, I don't play the JP, so I don't know about Bima, but he's probably S+ if I had to guess. Yeah. And that's it for the Lancer tier list. I think I will not change anything. This looks pretty good. Maybe Q prototype B+ is a bit harsh. Maybe you could argue he should be a bit higher. But I think you don't really have a reason to level him when Q exists. Because they kind of fill the same role, and original Q is definitely better, so if you don't have overflowing resources, then it is a bit of a waste to raise him, in my opinion. But that should be all. Okay, moving on to the rider tier list. We have some good servants here, so you will see quite a bit in X actually. But starting off, we have Bartholomew Roberts, B tier. His damage is not good, but he can support the team, and for a 1-star that's enough for him to be at least usable. Saint George, A+, great tank, can buy you 3 turns with taunt and guts, but he has no damage and he can steal your stars because he is a rider, but he's still really good. I use him quite often actually. Blackbeard is a bit weak in my opinion, C tier. He is a DPS, but his numbers are low because he is a low rarity. And that is what's killing him at the end of the day. The low attack stat makes him a bad DPS. He has some survivability, but nothing noteworthy. Medusa, so she is a bit of a special case for me because I have a 120 copy and I don't really use a level 70 Medusa ever because I immediately raised here. My Medusa would be A+, but I think even a level 70 copy would be around B+. I think she's a good AoE option because of the battery and good damage for a 3-star. You also have some utility with the stun and the crit chance down on the enemies. Yeah, I think B+ is fair. Boudica is a decent support at B+. She provides some arts up, a low cooldown guts, which is valuable. Her NP is not great though, which is what's keeping her from going higher. Also, the same problem as with all support riders. She steals crit stars. That's gonna be an ongoing issue. But she's still decent. And Uchiwa Kamaru is the best 3-star in the rider class at S+. Her damage is amazing, both in Noble Phantasm and crits. Sometimes she even out damages 5 stars, which is amazing for a 3-star. She even has some survivability. Her only issues are kind of low NP gain, and she has trouble generating crit stars consistently. But she's really, really strong. S+ is definitely a good place for her. Alexander, B+. He is one of the few quick supports in the game, and I do think he's more of a support than a DPS. Even though his NP damage is good, you will have some trouble getting to that NP because you don't have any batteries or NP gain up, which is why I mostly rate him as a support. He also has the very valuable buff removal and the charm on top of that on humanoid enemies, which, if you didn't know, every servant is a humanoid except BB, but that doesn't matter. Rider of Resistance is D tier, quite a weak servant. Damage is not good. In fact, even Blackbeard deals more NP damage than him. NP gain is nothing special, no battery, no survivability. I think he's weak, he needs help. Red hair, C tier. He did get a buff which gave him some useful utility and crit stars, but his crits are not that strong. His damage is lacking, and you will have trouble getting high NP levels because he is story locked, and I feel like he suffers more than other story locked servants because you do need his NP to deal some good damage because your crits are certainly not gonna do the job. Yeah, he needs more buffs. Mandricardo is a strong 3-star rider at A+. He deals good damage, can sort of loop with his arts single target NP. Has some decent survivability with a defense up, but he is a bit clunky to use because of his second ability. You can only use it when you're half health, and when you do use it, you die. Also, you do get an attack down on whenever you NP. It's not a big deal, but it is a bit annoying. Yeah, after the buff, you could argue he is S, but I'm still a bit hesitant because I cannot test him, so he will stay in A+. Marie Antoinette, B tier. She's usable, but her damage is not good. NP gain is bad, and she has no battery, so using the NP, while the NP is good, it's hard to use the NP. She has great survivability though, so you can still make her work. Martha, B+, has some good support utility for the team, but damage is not good. NP damage is also not amazing, and you will have trouble getting to that NP. But she does have buff removal, which is quite valuable. So she's good. And Bonnie and Mary Reed, 8 here. Now, despite not being higher, her damage is potentially the best out of everyone here. Yes, even the 5 stars. You just need to get her at 1 HP, which is not a hard thing to do because she has Taunt and the 1 HP guts, which is exactly what you want. The problem is she is a nuke, but a one-time nuke only. You use her NP once and she will probably die after that, because she is at 1 HP after all. And that's the reason why she's not higher, but keep in mind, her damage is actually the best out of everyone here, just for one time. Artoria, Alter Santa Rider, beat here. She is a bit weak, but after the buff, she does provide some utility for the team, some NP battery for the team. She can barely be useful, but I still think she's relatively weak. Similar with Astolfo, also beat here. His damage is not great, very unreliable, very RNG. He has a chance to stun, not guaranteed. Chance to do crit damage up, also not guaranteed. His NP is actually good with the evade, but his NP gain is atrociously bad. So yeah, you do need to put some work to make him do anything, really. Sagada Kintogi Rider, S tier. His damage is great, though his survivability is not great. Community does overrate him, I feel like. Most people would say he's S plus or even EX. He is not. Even Ushi Wakamaru, I think, is better because of lower rarity, so that means lower party cost. Also, her abilities are way better than Sagada Kintogi's. But yeah, he's still very strong. Free NP5 is guaranteed damage, basically. Mordred, 8 tier. Mordred is one of those cases where you really want NP2 and higher. At NP1, I'm not even sure if she's worth raising. The reason for this is her Noble Phantasm is extremely spammable. So all of her damage relies on her NP. So you do need high NP levels. Also survivability is decent, so she can tank quite a bit. Ishtar Rider, 8 here. A good all-rounder, I would say. Good damage and okay survivability. NP gain is also decent, but she's not exceptional at anything, that's why she's not higher. Sakamoto Ryoma, also 8 here. Good damage on the Noble Phantasm because he's a free NP5 as well. Abilities are not great though, and he used to not do good crits, but now you also have the upend, so he can do some good damage. No survivability though, that's why he's not higher. Carmilla Rider is weak, but she's still beat here. She can do some supporting for the team, but her damage is just bad. I guess she does generate some crit stars, but she also steals those crit stars. She has many issues, but I still think you can make her work if you want. Murasaki Shikibu Rider is very strong at S+. Damage is really good, top tier you might even say. Spammable Noble Phantasm, that also applies good debuffs on the abilities as well. But she has no survivability, and that's one of the reasons why she's not higher. Habetrot, also known as Habicat, is EX. Because you do get the free NP5, her damage is actually great. Even though her main role isn't even DPSing, it's supporting. She can sacrifice herself to buff by a lot another female ally, which is quite valuable. You could say she's a bit similar to Arash, how she does a big nuke and then she dies, but when she dies, she also gives a lot of benefits, so that's why I think she's very easy to feed in many teams, and I think she's EX tier. Kainis Rider, A tier. Now, despite having pretty good damage, she's not higher because the issue is she has way too much competition. We have so many single target DPS in the Rider class. Like, you can see how many high tier we got in 3 and P5, Ryoma. So she has a lot of competition, that's why she's placed a bit lower despite having good damage. Elizabeth Bathory Rider or Cinderella Ellie. Might surprise some, EX tier. I think she's the best welfare in the game. Her damage is great as a 3 and P5, of course. Survivability is amazing. A 3-hit invincible on a 5-turn cooldown is quite insane. Actually, all of her cooldowns are really good. Her uptime is really good. Her only issue used to be her crits were not that strong. But now that we have the new append, she also fixed that issue is also fixed. She has no weaknesses, in my opinion. You could say that demerits on the abilities are her weakness, but she cleanses whenever she NPs, and you can also use command codes to cleanse them if you wish. So I think you can't go wrong with Cinderella. She is one of the strongest riders. Oh yeah, also she was the reason I was able to beat the Anastasia Super Recollection quest. She survived the whole way through, which goes to show how good her survivability is. And reminder that I play with a ban list, so no Castoria or anything like that. Dobrynia is 8 tier. Her damage is good, but nothing amazing. She has a niche against the dragons, which is not good, because how often do you fight caster dragons? Well, almost never. But she can still deal decent damage and has some survivability. She has been buffed recently. I don't know how good her buff is because I cannot test it out. I think she's 8 tier. Huang Feihu, 8 tier. Admittedly, I don't have much experience with him. I do not have time to practice or use him in any decently hard fight. But he seems good, but nothing exceptional. Francis Drake has amazing damage, S tier, but she has no survivability, which is holding her back. She does have some DPS utility with ignore, invincible, ignore defense, which is always a great combo. Also has batteries, can generate crit stars. But I do think she is a step below top tier. Queen Mev, A+. Damage is good, especially if you're fighting males, but her supporting ability is a bit weird. Her abilities are a bit clunky because you need male allies to get the full benefits, and she herself doesn't benefit too much from her own abilities. Charm is also not guaranteed, which is very unreliable. Iskandar, B+, while the recent buff helps a lot because now he has an NP battery and his NP damage is really high for an AoE servant. But he still has many issues. His basic attacks are nothing special, crit damage is not there, and he has no survivability. But he's still more than usable. Ozymandias, EX tier. Damage is really high, survivability is great, with constant defense up and heals. Also has batteries, and P gain is good. NP is really strong with the NP seal on top of the good damage that I already said. Yeah, he kind of does it all. He only lacks hard defense, but that's not too hard to provide. So yeah, he will not let you down. Quetzalcoatl, A+, great damage, but overall abilities are a bit weak nowadays. She used to be stronger, but now she has fallen a little bit behind. But she will still impress with some of her damage. And also a little bit of utility on NP seal on the NP. Artoria, Alter, Summer, Rider, A+, potentially very high damage if you use her third ability twice and then you use her NP. Close to the highest in the whole tier list, maybe only outdamaged by Anboni. But her basic attacks are nothing special. Abilities are a little bit on the weaker side and also no crit damage. So yeah, I can't go any higher than this. Ivan the Terrible is in fact not terrible. Actually, in my opinion, the strongest rider in the game, EX tier. He does it all. He does everything. Really high damage, very tanky, a lot of utility, generates crit stars, good NP gain, good hit counts, has a super mod now, has an NP battery now as well. He does everything really. I don't know what his weakness is supposed to be. Achilles, S+, also very strong, great damage, great survivability, but I think he's not quite the X tier. He's still really strong though, that's why he's S+. Rhines is the easiest X tier on this rider tier list. I did say Ivan is the strongest rider, but I meant that as a DPS. If we're talking about power levels in general, Rhines is the best rider. Rhines, in fact, is also one of the best supports in the game, even compared to other classes. Yeah, extremely powerful, and there's a reason why she is in the ban list. Da Vinci, Lily, Rider. S+, very spammable Noble Phantasm, can provide a lot of support for the team, and she has the niche of being one of the best overchargers, which is to stack Noble Phantasm on top of the other, or just provide the overcharge buff. And it's a pretty strong niche. We have some strong overcharge buffs in overcharge effects in many servants. So yeah, you can use her almost anywhere really. Also has some decent survivability with low cooldown. Only one hit, but that's usually what you need. Europa is A+, as a half DPS, half tank. She has great survivability, but her damage is a bit reliant on her landing the charm, which can be a challenge because the charm chance is only 60%, quite low honestly. If she was more reliable, she could go higher, but she's stuck in A+ for now. Still pretty strong though, relatively high. Odysseus is S tier. His damage is not quite top tier, that's why he's not S+ or higher. But his supporting is great. He has the double taunt, great survivability, can also remove all enemy defenses with his NP. NP is also fairly spammable. NP gain is good all around. So yeah, he is really strong, but not quite top tier. Nemo Rider. Now, normally I would place him at around A or B+. But because he's actually a decent option for the hardest fight in the game, I will push him up to A+. The hardest fight in the game is in Low Spell 6 against a super large enemy, and he has a niche against the super large enemies. But he does have other things holding him down. He does need a water battlefield or space battlefield to get his full effects. And when you do, he's amazing, but when you don't, he's nothing special. But NP gain on cards is great. NP is fairly spammable, and that's sort of what you need in the hardest fight in the game. That's why he gets a bit of a special treatment. Tai Gong Wong is a strong support, but he's not quite top tier. S plus, I would say. Very strong all around, good damage, good supporting. Survivability is not good, and that's one of the reasons why he's not quite X. Now we get to Constantine, one of the most controversial 5 stars, one of the most debated ones. Normally I would place him around A+, but he has gotten a very strong buff, like really strong. I'm thinking about S tier right now, but I can't actually test the buff out because it's not out on an A yet. He might even be S+, the buff does look quite insane. I will hesitate for now and place him on S, but do keep in mind, he might actually be S+. Kyokutei Bakin, she is a decent support. The A+ provides plenty of buffs, but they are all kind of low value, low numbers. She has some modifiers. She is a bit hard to use with the third ability. You have to kind of stack up the attack ups with her arts cards in order to get good damage in. So that is holding her back a bit. And that concludes the rider tier list. I don't think I'll be making any more changes. Maybe I am a bit lenient on Nemo. Maybe I should just jump the gun and go S+, but with Constantine. But I'll stay like this for now. Let's move on. Okay, caster time. Casters are very good supports, but sadly they're not very good at DPSing because of the 0.9 multiplier, damage multiplier. It does hurt them a lot. The highest DPS in this tier list won't even reach S+. It will reach S at least. But yeah, starting off with Mozart, he's A+. A great art support and generally provides good support for the team. Hans Christian Andersen is an amazing support at S+, amazing low budget, low rarity support. Provides damage for the team, some survivability, some healing, pretty much everything you want in a support. Shakespeare is B+, a decent buster support with some survivability for himself, but a weak Noble Phantasm keeps him a bit lower. Chen Gong, S tier, now he's a better buster support than Shakespeare by quite a bit. Provides good defenses for the team, taunt is always useful, and sometimes the Noble Phantasm can do some DPSing if you want to do some sacrifice plays. Yeah, very versatile. Medea B+, can be great for removing enemy buffs. You can go from 0 to 100 instantly with one ability, so she requires no craft essence, so very cheap buff removal. Her damage is not good though, and the rest of her utility is nothing amazing, so B+ is as high as I can go. Gilles de Rais, caster, is C tier. I don't think he's good, even after the buffs. He still doesn't really function all that well. Can provide some support for foreigners, but you would probably rather put other supports than Gilles de Rais, even if you have foreigners in your team. Mephistopheles B tier. His third ability is his signature ability. No one can do what he can do with 3 times buff block with infinite duration. That can sometimes be handy, though it is very situational, that's why he's not higher. DPS is nothing special, so if you use him, you will only use him for that ability, nothing else. Kukulane caster, A+, solid DPS option actually, if you manage to get more than NP1. Good survivability as well, and some crits surprisingly, so yeah, solid overall. Paracelsus von Hohenheim is B+, can provide some art support for the team and also a high NP gain up for one target, which is good, a good combo with art sub. But his damage is terrible, just absolutely terrible, and cooldowns are very high, so you will get limited uses out of him. Charles Babbage is A tier. Good damage, though nothing amazing, and also has some survivability. Geronimo is D tier, the worst caster. Even after the buff, I don't think he's worth using. Maybe you could use him as a quick support, but it's too niche in my opinion. Avi Kebron is also A tier, a decent AoE option if you want to immediately use NP on turn 1 and clear out some mobs. After that, maybe you want him to die and also provide some support for the team. A decent strategy, but nothing amazing. Alright, and here we go. Asclepius, to no one's surprise, is very high tier. Actually, EX tier. After the buff, he is insane. Before the buff, I would probably place him as plus, but now he does way too much. I cannot place him lower than EX. He provides lots of healing, probably the best healing in the game. Provides damage support, provides guts, NP seals the enemy, NP gain up for the team. He does everything for only 7 party cost, which is quite insane. Zhang Jue is at B+. Admittedly, I have not used him that much, so I'm not super confident on the placement, but he seems to do some damage, though a bit unreliable because of the RNG third skill. Can provide some utility for the team and some support though, so that counts as something. Elizabeth Caster, also at B+, and once again I admit I don't have much experience with her because I do not have her. I'm not a year 1 player and it's hard to find her in the support list, so yeah, not many chances to use her really. But she seems okay-ish. Damage is still low even at NP5, though she does have some utility, so she's not useless, she can do stuff. Medea Lily at B tier. Now she probably has the highest healing numbers in the game. The problem is you probably only do them one time in a battle. She's sort of a one-time elixir or full restore if you prefer. And it's valuable to a degree, but it's only one time, so you can't really get that much usage out of her. Nursery Rhyme got a very strong buff on her second skill, which places her on A+. Her damage is actually pretty good right now, can even do some crits. Has good defenses, batteries, she has a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, she's still a caster, so damage is nothing truly exceptional. Helena Blavatsky, also A+. Pretty good support for the team, can provide team batteries and rainbow buffs for the team. Also, NP applies many debuffs on the enemies, though damage is once again not good. Also, she relies on RNG and P strength up to really get her damage out, which is always bad to rely on RNG. Thomas Edison, A+, has a unique first ability, which is able to lower the ability cooldowns of one of your allies. Very unique, and that gives him quite a lot of points. But his damage is very bad. Although he provides some other support for the team with overcharge, crit stars and NP damage up, so he gets a relatively high placement. Irisville has had one of the strongest buffs in the game, and she went from being the worst to just being bad C tier. She is comparable to Medea Lily. They both do a lot of heals, but Media Lily provides more utility with buff removal resist. Also, she does not need a craft essence to use her NP. She can go from 0 to 100 alone. Irisville cannot do that. She needs some craft essence to be able to immediately use her NP. And technically she has more survivability, but that's not that valuable because you probably will not get to use her NP twice or any of her abilities twice. So yeah, she still needs more buffs. Nidocris is similar with Avikebron at A tier. She can also NP turn 1 to clear some mobs. Now she has a high death chance, so if you're clearing mobs, damage won't really matter. But if you do want her to DPS some bosses or DPS in general, you do need NP2. NP1 is not enough, which is why she's not higher. Marie Antoinette Caster, C tier, her damage is very bad. In fact, even at NP2, she cannot even outdamage Shakespeare, which is very sad. Although her survivability is great, but why would you want a bad DPS to survive? Gilgamesh Caster is S tier, good support buffs for the team, decent damage, and surprisingly generates a lot of crit stars. So yeah, he's pretty good. Kerke is B+. Her damage is okay on the Noble Phantasm. Her basic attacks are not good though. No crit damage, not good damage in general. She can turn the enemy into a pig, which is basically a stun, but with more conditions because certain enemies cannot be turned into pig. Some utility is nice with a third skill and also some debuffs on the enemies with the defense down. Overall, nothing amazing though. Queen of Sheba, similarly B+. Damage is better than Kirky, but she has the problem of being a story locked, so you will have trouble getting more NP levels. Has some good crit damage and pierce invul, so utility is interesting for a DPS, but can't go any higher than that. Sig is A tier, fairly good looper, though I do have to say his NP gain on his normal cards is very bad. You do kind of basically need to support him to get the loop going. Once you do get him going, his damage is good though as a free welfare NP5. Shuten Doji Caster, A+, a very good single target option against assassins. She is a welfare, so free NP5 is expected. Her whole kit is designed around countering assassins. For example, assassins tend to crit a lot, but she has a crit down. Assassins spam NP a lot, she has an NP seal. Assassins usually are demonic, there are quite a lot of demonic assassins, the ghosts, the soul eaters and all that. And she has a special modifier against demonic. Usually they have evade as well, and she has sure hit, so in general she's designed to counter assassins. Even then though, she's not top tier, so it's a little sad, but it is what it is. Miyu Edelfelt is A tier. Her whole strategy revolves around her Noble Phantasm and spamming it, stacking all the buffs, stacking NP gain back. And once you do stack the NP, her damage is good and provides a lot of support for the team. But you do need a more specific team around here. You can't just drop her on any team. So that's why I think she's placed a little bit lower. Charlotte Corday, A+, actually a very good option for single target DPSing. Has a modifier when skill sealing the enemy, which can be RNG sometimes, not super reliable, not always guaranteed. But she provides also some survivability for her team, which is nice. If you manage to get her NP2, I would say she is worthy of S tier, but I'll leave her on A+ for now. Martha Caster, Lily. S+, very strong welfare, very good support, damage buffs for the team. People think she's a support, quick support, but she's not. She just happens to have a quick Noble Phantasm. Damage modifiers against divine enemies is actually very useful. A lot of the hard enemies are divine. I would say more than half of the hard fights in the game are divine, so you will for sure be glad to raise her. Daikokuten. I admit I haven't used them a lot, but the few times I have, they were impressive. So I'll start with S tier. Provides good support for the team. Damage is decent, good even against Earth. I will say at NP1, damage is disappointing against non-Earth enemies. But Assassins do have a lot of Earth enemies, so I don't think it's unfair to assume you will mostly use her against Earth enemies. Also provides a very, very large amount of crit stars. You will constantly crit if you have Daikokuten in your team, which is something not many casters can say, so she gets extra points for that. Good Zetian caster. S tier, strong buffs for the team, can stun the enemy, can also reduce their charge. All of them are valuable support mechanics. She can also deal some damage herself, and also applies the undead debuff, which is not always relevant, but if you happen to have the Skathak Lancer and the enemy is also divine, you pretty much get the highest damage potential in the game, so that counts as something. Alright, now for the 5 stars, starting off with Waver. Now, Waver, if this was last year or any year before 2024, I would probably place him at the X. He has really good defenses, really good buffs, a lot of NP charging, great overall. But I think he has dropped to S+ for me. You could argue he's still X, but he's definitely top tier in general. I just think we have too many OP supports right now, which do push him down a bit. But he's still really strong. If you happen to pick him with your free SSR ticket, that would be completely understandable. And similar to Waver, Tamo no Mae S+. If this was 2 or 3 years ago, I would probably place her at the X. But we have gotten so many arts supports that she is no longer a must in every team. There are times when even if you have a full arts team, you might not want Tamo no Mae in your team. But she's still very strong, so I don't think she will ever go any lower than S+. So yeah, I'll stick with S+. Sanzan Xuanzang is good at A+. Though the community does overrate her, in my opinion. They would probably say yes or S+. She is not that amazing. She's good, but not that great. Damage is good, but it does fall off after the first use because the NP damage up is only 1 turn on a 7-turn cooldown. And you're probably not getting that ability again because she has no survivability. Her lasting long is not part of your plan. She can back-to-back NP sometimes because she has a taunt, and if she gets hit with NP gain up, she gets quite a bit of NP gain back. Also some utility, but a bit hard to use. Her debuff immune is only 1 turn, so you do need to have some foresight on when the enemy will use the debuffs. Da Vinci Caster has an overloaded kit, S+. She has so much stuff, arts up for the team, NP battery for herself, constant healing, guts, low cooldown guts, which is always amazing. NP hits fairly hard as well, applies a strong defense down as well. She has a lot of stuff. generally overloaded kit, so yeah, she's very strong. Ilias Will von Einsburn at A+. She actually deals the highest NP damage out of everyone here, but her buffs are only 1 turn, Buster Up is only 1 turn, so you can't keep up that damage for every NP. I want to take a moment and compare the two, Sansang and Ilia, because historically they've always been compared by the community, since they were for a long time the only 5-star DPS options for single target casters. And Ilia does more damage than Sansang and has more survivability, but Sansang has more utility for the team, so I would say they're pretty equal. As a main DPS, I think Ilia is slightly better, but not significant enough to place her a whole tier above Sansang. And of course, if you value utility more, of course, Sansang is better. Merlin is an easy EX tier, and even without the buff, he would still be EX, but with the buff, he's even better. One of the best supports you can bring in a hard fight, provides everything you want, survivability, very high damage buffs, constant healing, and NP spamming. That's all you need in an overpowered support, really. Scheherazade at B+, she has a very low attack stat, and that hurts your DPS potential a lot. If you are fighting king enemies, her damage is great, but sadly that's not very common, so usually you're gonna be a bit disappointed by her damage. Tankiness, she does have survivability and also an unreliable charm. If you happen to first use the NP and then charm, you can guarantee it for one enemy. But that is jumping through a lot of hoops just to get something out of her. The double friendly guts is good though, so you can make her work. Nerocaster is very strong DPS in my opinion, S tier. Her damage is good, has defenses as well, defense up, guts, targetable guts even. She has the unique ability of being able to ignore class disadvantage when getting hit. So, and that can be useful, let's say, if you're fighting assassins, and there's also a Berserker or a Rider, you will know she will not be taking extra damage from them, which is good for any hard fights, really. Very straightforward, good damage, yeah. Anastasia at A tier. Damage is decent. The recent buff also helps. She can deal some AoE stun, some AoE arts down, has a battery attack down on the enemies, lots of debuff on the enemies actually, and debuff resistance to go with those debuffs. Ignore invul is always useful, but ultimately her damage is not up to par with the higher tiers. Skathak Skadi is another easy EX tier. Just like Merlin, they are both in the ban list for a reason. She is the premium quick support along with her ruler version. And she's insane. If you have a quick DPS, you absolutely want her in your team. Murasaki Shikibu A+, can provide some good support for the team. Damage is also decent. I will say if you can hit her niches, damage is actually kind of insane. Might even be S or even S+ worthy if you hit all of her niches. But I'm not sure how often you do hit the niches, so I'm gonna stay hesitant and place her on A+. But always keep in mind, she has potential to be higher. Alright, and here we go, undisputably the strongest servant in the game, by quite a bit I would even say. In fact, she's not even EX tier, she is a tier above everyone else in every other tier list as well. She is, for sure, the best servant, and by far the best option for you to win any boss fight, any exhibition quest, hard fight in general. If you want to maximize your chances of winning, Castoria is always the first thing that should come to your mind. I don't think I need to explain much. Her abilities speak for herself, especially the Noble Phantasm. Miss Crane is a strange one, but I will place her on S tier. I haven't used her that much because she is very much a combo servant. The better servants you have, the even better she becomes. You usually use her to stack a lot of buffs and one-shot the enemy. Even outside of combos, she's still good. But I will place her on S because she has a very high potential in, maybe not in low-level accounts, but eventually you will get a lot of mileage out of her. And last but certainly not least, Izumo no Okuni at S tier. I think she's the best single target 5-star caster, but even then she doesn't reach S plus because DPS casters are just not quite there, honestly. But she's pretty strong. Now NP damage is actually lower than Ilia and Sanzang, but her crits are much better. Survivability is also strong. Provides cooldown reduction on anyone you want, which is very valuable. And if the enemy happens to be demonic, then her damage skyrockets. So yeah, she is very strong. And that is it for the caster tier list. I do not think I will be making any more changes. You could argue Waver is EX, maybe Murasaki S, but I think this is good enough. Alright, time for Assassins. Assassins also have a 0.9 multiplier, just like casters, though they do end up being better DPS than casters. Their specialty is supposed to be star generation, though currently in the game you usually just get stars from abilities instead of actual card star generation. Starting off with Sasaki Kojiro, he's pretty strong at 8 tier, despite being a 1-star. His NP damage is pretty good, crits are also decent, NP gain is good as well. Has some survivability, generally very high potential servant. If you grail him, you can expect him to perform up to maybe even S tier. Mata Hari is weak but not useless, B tier. I still think she's worth raising as a very low budget, low party cost support. Can provide some good crit buffs for the team and some debuffs for the enemies. Charm is unreliable, but hey, it's there. Charlotte Corday, she's weak, C tier. She got a buff which fixes her biggest issue, which was the RNG third skill. Despite that, I'm not entirely sure if she's worth B tier. I cannot test out the buff, it's only on JP right now. Low damage in general, low card damage, crits are not great, NP gain is kind of low, has some survivability though. And she has the great utility of ignore invincible and ignore defense. But if your damage is low, those are not that valuable. Hassan of the Cursed Arm, B tier, an okay DPS / crit star generator. He can also tank some hits because he has a 3-hit evade with infinite duration, which is always great. Can deal some crit damage. And P damage is also okay for a low star. Ultimately, the low star stats do hold him back from DPSing. But he does generate a lot of crit stars, so he's still worth raising in my opinion. Charles Henry Sanson is D tier, he's pretty bad. Honestly, abilities are terrible. And P can do some decent damage if you hit the modifiers, but the modifiers are not common. Man trade is very rare, so generally I do not recommend raising him. Phantom of the Opera, I was gonna place him on D tier, but he recently got a buff, and it's a very strong one, so I'm not certain if he's B tier or C tier. He's not super high still, but he might be worth raising. I'll place him on C tier, and once we get the buff on NA in nearly 2 years, which is very far away, you can make your own judgment. Jinke, B tier, she can deal some good damage with the NP, but that's about it. Everything else is lackluster. Card damage is not there. Crit generation is not amazing. Crit damage is not good. And no survivability. In fact, she loses HP whenever she uses her NP, which is not good. But yeah, damage is still fine on the NP. Henry, Jekyll, and Hyde is terrible. They are terrible at D tier. I don't really see a reason why to ever use them. You need to jump through a lot of hoops to make them work, and I don't think that's worth it. Hassan of the 100 Personas is good DPS at 8 tier. NP is quite strong, can loop fairly well, though you do need some support because NP gain on the normal art card is not that great, and she has an RNG buff on her second skill, which if you fail does lower her looping potential. Also, third skill is not great. Even though it's a big heal, you remove all of your buffs, which is not worth it. Still a good DPS option. Puma Kotaro is a good support / star generator on A tier. He cannot DPS, you will not use him for DPS. Applies so many debuffs on the enemy team, which helps your team, of course. Can also help a teammate with evasion for more survivability. And yeah, as I said, generates a lot of crit stars. Hassan of the Serenity, B+. Damage can be good. You can stack some poison. It is a little bit of a meme, but sometimes it does work and damage does ramp up. Has some debuffs to help out the team as well, and she generates some crit stars despite being an art servant, which is nice to see. Okada is 8 here. His damage potential is actually the highest out of everyone here, even the 5 stars, if you manage to find a humanoid with a mana attribute. For that one turn, he will deal huge amounts of damage, but his uptime on his abilities is pretty bad, so I cannot place him any higher. Stheno is a meme in the community, but I still think she is B+. Her support ability is fairly decent, can buff divine allies, can charm enemies, though a bit unreliable, can also NP drain enemies, which is also a bit unreliable. Noble Phantasm is useful though, because removes all enemy buffs, which is very spammable, honestly, because her NP gain is very, very high. And I think it is worth mentioning, she does have death on her NP, and it can be useful. I used her in the Leonidas exhibition quest, and actually she was one of the better options for that one. Carmilla is a good choice on A tier, has a special modifier against females, which is not hard to find. Abilities are a bit weak, but notably she has a 50% crit chance down on one enemy for 3 turns, which is basically saying the enemy cannot crit for 3 turns, which is good. Ryugi Shiki on S tier, very strong option for DPS. Welfare MP5 helps a lot. Has ignore invul, ignore defense, which is a great combo as always. Can sometimes back-to-back NP, but she does need a little bit of help in spamming the Noble Phantasm. Uptime on the abilities sadly is not great, only 1 turn for the first ability. And third ability is also not amazing, so abilities in general a bit weak, but damage is great, so I think S tier is very fair for her. Emiya Kiritsugu sadly is not worth raising, C tier, even though his Noble Phantasm is fairly strong. Getting to that NP will be an ordeal and a half. His NP gain is so low, maybe the lowest in the game. He needs a lot of help in order to NP, and he has no batteries either. So I think you need to provide so much help that he's not worth using at the end of the day. Skathak Summer Assassin is weak but not useless, B tier, can deal some good AoE damage, but her abilities are pretty weak. Uptime is not good, and she has a taunt even though she's not a tank. The abilities don't mix that well, but hey, she can still deal some damage. Yanqing is a decent DPS option at B+. If you manage to hit his modifiers, his damage is pretty good actually, but he lacks survivability, so I can't place him too high up. Zetian is actually very strong S tier, one of the very few quick supports we have that is not a limited 5-star, aka Skadi. She provides a lot of buffs for the team, a lot of debuffs for the enemy, is fairly tanky with the defense up and heals, and can also deal damage herself. So if you want her to DPS, she can do it. If you want her to support, she can also do that. She is pretty strong. Midocrace Assassin is a bit weak, B tier. She is a DPS, but for some reason she has tank abilities, which don't quite match her playstyle. She is supposed to be an AoE arts looper. Looping is decent. Damage is okay, but nothing exceptional. At the end of the day, she gets screwed over by her weird mix of tank abilities. Mochizuki Chiyome is a decent DPS option, B+. The buffs do help her a lot. And P damage is good actually. Card damage is also okay with the Curse modifier, which she of course can apply herself, Curse. Also some debuffs, some survivability. Overall decent, but nothing special. Kado Danzo B tier. Damage is horrible. You will not use her as a DPS. Instead, you use her as a support, defensive support, where you apply 1 evade and 1 invincible, but that's all she can do. Ushiwakamaru Assassin B tier. Her NP damage can be quite high against lawful enemies, but that is a bit niche, and also her card damage is not good, so as a DPS she does leave a lot to be desired. Consort U C tier. Her damage is way too low to justify raising her, while she has some interesting abilities with constant healing, constant NP gain. If your damage is that low and you're not a tank, then you can't really do much of anything. Grey is A+, pretty high AoE damage, higher on the higher end for assassins at the very least, and P5 welfare does help with that, of course. And the rest of her kit is not that remarkable, so that's why she's not higher. Okida Assassin B tier. Her damage potential is not bad. The problem is all the demerits you get along with that damage, which is very hard to justify using her over her competition. Kichihogen, a good welfare, A+, also deals good AoE damage, similar to Grey. Grey deals more, but Kichihogen has the better kit overall, so it does balance out. Valkyrie Assassins, they all have the same kit, you just choose your favorite one, so of course I'll rank them the same. At A+, along with the other welfares. They loop better than the other welfares, though the NP gain on the normal arts card is very low, so you do need some supports to get them going. But the overall abilities are pretty good, provide support for the team, has a strong crit damage, party-wide evade is always great, and a strong modifier against Earth, which comes up quite often actually. I'm for the 5 stars, starting off with Jack the Ripper at S tier, very good DPS, generates a lot of crit stars, has a super high NP gain, one arts crit can get you like 70% or more. The problem is her abilities are weak, the heal is weak, and her evade is attached with her quick up, which is not a good thing. Usually it ends up screwing you over. Usually you waste one of the two, which is sad. She's still very strong, so S tier. Cannot quite say the same for Mysterious Heroine X, B+. Her NP damage is great, but everything else is not great. Stun is not guaranteed, which is very bad, even though it's delayed, which sucks. Invincible is nice on a 5-turn cooldown, but nothing insane. And her ability, her special modifier against Sabers ends up being useless most of the time. Shuten Doji, A tier. Her NP damage is actually the highest out of all of the AoE assassins. The problem is her abilities are sort of weak. Has charm that's not guaranteed, a guts that doesn't do much, and P gain is kind of low, and P refund is very low on only one hit. Debuffs can be useful though, and usually riders don't have a lot of resistance, so you can expect to usually hit the debuffs. Cleopatra, a very strong assassin, S tier, deals good damage and is also incredibly tanky with the constant heals and defense up and invincible on top of that. She's almost guaranteed to live a long time. And on top of that has a very high NP gain, so you can expect multiple NPs in one fight. King Hassan, one of my favorites, S+, sadly not quite the X, at least not yet. His latest buff is not out on an A, so I cannot test it out, but I still think he's S+. Very high damage, very high NP gain, very tanky, high stats all across the board. The issue is to draw out his full potential, you do need to solo with him. If you put him in a team, he is hindered a bit because you do need his card to deal all of his maximum damage. Another issue is his Noble Phantasm. It's quite weak, basically has no effect because death is useless in most boss fights. Would be nice if he ever gets a piercing wool or defense or anything like that. Osaka Behime is a decent support, B+, can provide various utility and buffs for the team, but ultimately they are a bit low value, so I cannot place her too high up. Semiramis is, in my opinion, the second weakest 5-star in the game after Artemis. B tier, she's still not useless, applies a 50% buster down, which can help your team a lot, but you do need to pay 8 crit stars, which can be a drag sometimes, and her other abilities are very weak. NP damage is okay, not bad, though overall damage is low because she has only one buster, no crit damage buffs, and she's an assassin with a 0.9 multiplier. Lee Assassin is S tier, very high single target damage. Actually, if you ignore the mana attributes of Izo, he has the highest damage out of everyone here. The issue is his uptime is terrible, all of his buffs are only one turn, and then he kind of does nothing until you use his NP again, which is not hard because his NP gain is pretty good, but it is a shame that you lose all of the buffs so quickly. Kama is, in my opinion, EX tier. She fits into every team very easily. You can use her even against non-riders because she constantly spams charm. Every time she NPs, she can charm, which is a bit overpowered, honestly. Also has an infinite duration guts, which is once again very strong. And it generates a good amount of crit stars. Damage is good, of course. Not as good as others, but I think the charm more than makes up for that. Koyanskaya of Light is a very easy EX tier. She is the best buster support in the game, and on top of that, if you want, you can even DPS with her, so what else is there to say? Easy EX tier. Yuyan Zuo, S tier. She and Cleopatra, I think, are the best AoE assassins you can have. Sadly, that's still not enough for S+. She deals good damage, very good crit damage. AoE damage is good, though a bit low at times, actually lower even than Semiramis. But if you do hit the evil modifier, damage ends up being really high. And even if you don't, that's fine, because most of the damage comes from buster crits, and you still stun on the MP sometimes and generate a lot of crit stars. P gain is high, has some survivability, and also some good damage utility with Ignore Invincible. And while I'm not rating the JP servants, Tezcatlipoca is coming out very soon, so I'll just briefly mention that I think he's S+, maybe even EX once I test him out. He's pretty strong. And that is it for Assassins. I do not think I'll be making any more changes. You could argue maybe I'm too harsh on Semiramis, maybe she should be a bit higher, but I do think she needs a buff. You could also say maybe Cleopatra is too high, but I agree that Huyan Zhuo is better than Cleopatra. She does have a buff in JP, which makes her very consistent, Cleopatra that is. And I cannot test it out, but I think it's enough to place her in high tier. Okay, moving on to Berserkers. Berserker is a very strong class because of its universal damage, which is very valuable. Their only weakness is that they die very easily, but if you manage to protect them, they will end the fight pretty quickly. First off, we have Spartacus, a decent budget AoE option at B+. Has a battery, relatively high NP damage for his rarity. Card damage is low though, so you will only use him as a one-time nuke, sort of, that can maybe take 1 or 2 hits. Asterios, B tier. Asterios is a bit of a weird case. His strategy is very different from the rest of the Berserkers. He actually has high defenses and very good debuffs on his Noble Phantasm. And for this reason, you want him to get hit, spam the NP more. If you manage to do that, if the fight favors these conditions, then he might actually go A+ or S. Like, there are some fights where he is absolutely ridiculous, but that is not the common case. Usually you won't be able to spam the NP that much. That's why I am very much hesitant to put him higher. I'm just letting you know he has high potential. Paul Banyan, B+, decent support. DPS is low, would not recommend for DPSing even though the NP is buffed. Caligula, B tier, he's a bit of a coin flip. If you manage to get all his RNG buffs, his damage potential is quite high. If you fail them all though, he will probably just die pretty fast without doing much. Still not useless though, I think he manages B tier, if barely. Eric Bloodaxe is bad. D tier, his damage is low, abilities are bad. Of course, he's not really tanky, he's a Berserker, so I don't see much reason to ever use him. Salome, C tier, she has combo potential with her third ability being able to fully charge your teammates, but I think that takes way too long. 7 turns is a lot, and she loses defenses while every turn, so protecting her is very hard. Damage is nothing amazing, so overall I don't think she's worth using. Lubu, surprisingly very strong, in fact the strongest 3-star Berserker in my opinion, A+. Despite being a year 1 servant without any buffs, his NP damage is super high, close to the highest out of everyone here. I think he's the 2nd or 3rd highest. Damage is great, as I just said, has some defenses as well, and there's a little bit of utility with the stun on his NP, though don't rely on that too much because it is a low chance. Darius is weak, C tier. He doesn't really do much of anything. NP damage is decent, but that's all. Defenses are bad. Card damage is bad. NP gain is bad even though he has NP gain up. Not worth using. Kiyohime, B tier, a decent AoE option. You do need to apply burn to the enemy to get the full benefits. The NP does apply burn, but ideally you would use some command codes to apply it immediately, or maybe someone else in the team. Mori Nagayoshi, A tier. His damage is good, great even, but his defenses are bad. In fact, he places defense down on himself, so he needs more protection than most, but he can deliver the damage when you need him to. Heracles, EX tier, some of the best solos in the entire game. He can carry you for like 90% of the entire story. Yes, he is that strong, and generally in challenge quests and boss fights, you can always just place him in the back line as a last man standing to finish the job. Do note, I am rating him with his Bondcraft essence, which gives him a lot of extra guts. If you don't have his Bond C, I do think he's lower, like maybe S or A+. His Bond C is a must. If you get him, you wanna get his Bondcraft essence as soon as possible. Lancelot has been left in the dust, C tier, 0 buffs, even after so many years, very weak abilities, weak damage. His only relevancy is with double Scuddy, some looping, but even that has fallen out of fashion. And anyway, this is not a farming tier list, so yeah. Tamamo Cat is B tier, not good damage, but serviceable. Has a little bit of survivability, but not enough to call her tanky or anything. Fran is also B tier. She can deal very high NP damage, and then she does nothing. She just shuts down. Beowulf is pretty good, A+. He can deal some good NP damage and some decently strong crits, and also has a guts to help him survive a few more turns. Ibaraki Doji, A tier, a nice package overall. Good damage, good defenses, and some utility, but nothing special overall. Chacha, B+, a good AoE option, since she is a welfare, you get NP5. And card damage can also be good at times, but defenses are non-existent, so you can only get so far with her. Berserker of El Dorado at A tier, some good damage, team-wide buffs are nice, debuff immunity is nice as well, and if you are fighting a Greek mythology male, then he is dead. He's just super dead. Oda Nobunaga Berserker at A tier, good damage, and if you happen to fight, you're fighting Divine, then damage is really high, like one of the best in the list, actually. Abilities are a bit weak, but I think the Divine specialty makes up for it. Atalanta Alter Berserker, A tier, good NP damage, pretty good crits as well, generates some crit stars, can NP seal the enemy, has an evasion. Overall, a good package. Yeah, she gets the job done. Jeanne d'Arc Summer Berserker is very strong at S tier. She has the highest NP damage out of everyone here, even the 5 stars, if you ignore the modifiers. And that's to be expected because she is a welfare NP5, which is great. Card damage is okay. Survivability is a bit of an issue, that's why she's not higher. She gets a one-hit evade for 3 turns, which usually is not enough. She will need a bit more help. Hijo Koyo, B+, though I admit I have not used her much at all, so I'm not super confident on the placement. Her abilities are a bit of a weird mix of support and DPS, which is not ideal for Berserkers, that's why I think other DPSs are better. Damage is okay though, it's fine, so that's why she won't go any lower. Brynhild Berserker, B+. Her damage is a bit low, NP damage is low, you kind of need NP2. Card damage is okay. She is a fairly tanky Berserker for her rarity. And she also provides some buffs for the team. Maybe you can argue that NP1 is B tier, but I'll leave her in B+. Sei Shonagon Berserker, A+. She has some very strong crits, reliable crits as well, because she can generate her own crit stars and absorb them. NP damage is also great, especially if you hit one of the modifiers. I would say if you get NP2, she's an easy S tier, so yeah, damage is great overall. Kriemhild is, in my opinion, the strongest 4-star Berserker, S+. Damage is great, quite a spammable Noble Phantasm. Abilities work very well with what she's trying to do. If you manage to hit any of her modifiers, damage is very high as well. If you don't hit any of the modifiers, damage is not as great as others, but she still works so well. Now for the 5 stars, Sakata Kintogi, S tier, very high NP damage, the highest from the 5 stars at the very least. High battery, 50% battery, high attack ups, and you can place a buster down, so if you have follow-up buster attacks, they will also deal massive damage, and can maybe stun, which buys him more turns. But his survivability is non-existent, so I can't place him any higher. Vlad Berserker, S tier, quite a strong looper if you provide the necessary supports. He has good defenses with defense up and 2 guts, but his NP gain is very low on his arts cards, so that's why he does need supports. By himself he's not enough to loop or even maybe not even do 1 NP. So that's what's keeping him higher. If you do provide the supports, he gets going very fast and damage is great. So yeah. Nightingale A+. She has a very strong buster buff. The 3rd strongest, I would say, in the game. She can even do some DPSing herself, if you so wish, though that's not her ideal scenario. NP is interesting because if you're fighting enemies that can pierce invul and pierce defense, you can nerf them by reducing their attack and NP and basically make them do 0 damage even when they NP, which is some nice utility, but NP gain is low, so you will probably only NP once in the entire fight, and anyway, you probably don't need her for the NP, it's for the buster buff and maybe some heals. Alter Berserker is EX tier. Turns out when your Berserker never dies because of all his defenses, he kills everything, and that's pretty good. He can carry you throughout most of the story, he's just strong enough for that. And he's very easy to include in any type of boss fight, because you know he will survive, and he is Berserker, so universal damage is always guaranteed. Minamoto no Raiko, a strong AoE option, S tier. If you hit any of her modifiers, her damage is basically single target, not even AoE anymore. It's that high. But getting to her NP is not the easiest. She has a small battery, but NP gain is not amazing, and survivability is also not amazing, only with 1 evade. She's very strong still. Heroine X Alter S tier, very high single target damage, and if you're fighting Sabers, ridiculously high damage, probably the highest in the game, I would guess, even outside of Berserkers. Her survivability is not great though, which is why she's a bit lower. Hijikata Toshizo A+, his NP is very strong, but you will probably only use it once unless you have a lot of supports to protect him. The strategy is to get him low and trigger his guts and get him to 1 HP, so he has the massive nuke of his Noble Phantasm. but it is a one-time nuke because most likely afterwards he dies before he gets another NP off. Shangyu, A tier. He is a bit similar to Hijikata Toshizo in the sense that he is a one-time nuke as well and then dies. I say that because his crits are very strong. You basically activate all of his buffs, crit really hard to break the enemy's bar, and then he just sort of dies. His NP damage is not bad, though getting to that NP is a bit of a challenge because no battery and he probably will not survive until you do the NP. I do think you should use him as a crit DPS and not an AoE DPS. Arjuna, Alter, Berserker, EX tier, his damage is ridiculous and the only requirement is to apply a debuff on the enemy, which is very easy. He can apply it himself, you can apply it with command codes, you can apply it with supports, and yeah, he's insane. I don't need to say much, you've probably seen him in many videos already. Miyamoto Musashi, Berserker, S+, a very strong AoE DPS option, can loop fairly well as well. Also has the specialty against Sabers, which gives her extra points, and has some survivability with Guts and Evade, overall very strong. Galatia is very strong. S tier, she is always compared with Vlad because they are both single target arts loopers. I do think Galatia is a bit better. Like, if you get her NP2, she is S+. If you get Vlad NP2, I'm not sure if he is S+. Her defense up is insane, 100% defense up, which means if you get hit and the enemy does not have attack buffs, you actually take 0 damage, which is great for a Berserker. NP is great as well, drains the enemy's NP. Has some utility with the buff removal resist and some healing for the team. And yeah, overall she's great. Morgan Le Fay is another EX tier. She is very strong. She provides much support to the team with crit stars, attack down on the enemies, crit down on the enemies. Overall makes everyone survive, including herself. Has massive attack buffs combined with defense downs. Crits are very, very strong and very consistent, which is very valuable for a Berserker. NP damage is not great, but you don't really mind that because the effects of the NP, the overcharge, is very helpful for the rest of the team. And of course, if you happen to hit the man modifier on her NP, then damage skyrockets. Ibuki Doji Berserker. Now, if this was a farming tier list, she would be X for sure, but in this tier list, she is still EX. I thought about dropping her to S+, but I can't do it. She is too strong. NP gain, NP refund on NP is ridiculous. Utility is very good on the NP, removing defenses, applying crit down. Earth modifier is always very strong. Abilities are also very strong. Cooldown reduction is great. Crits are great. She is everything you want in a Berserker. And finally, Senorikyu S tier. She is a strong AoE quick DPS. She came out fairly recently, so I have not been able to test her out much. But she seems quite strong. I'm not quite confident for the S+, so I'll be leaving her on S. Refund is good, high hit counts on the quick hearts, generate a lot of crit stars, good crit damage as well, and yeah, she is pretty strong. And that's all the Berserkers. Now for any changes, I've thought about it a bit, and I think Yohime is a bit too low. After her buff, her damage is pretty strong, can even surpass Chacha's, so it doesn't make sense for her to be lower than Chacha. Not sure if she's quite A tier yet, because the buff is not on an A yet, but I'm sure she's at least B+, as long as you bring some burn command codes. And that's it. I don't think I'll be making any more changes. That concludes the Berserker tier list, and that also concludes the 7 base classes, and we can now move on to the extra classes. Alright, time to finish it off with the extra classes. Now, as you can see, I've already completed the list. That's because I will not be going as in-depth for each and every single one of the servants, because I think if you're a new player, you should focus more on the base classes and then move on to extra classes later on after you've acquired a lot of the base classes. But I will be mentioning a few notes for some of the servants. I'm sure some of you will be surprised to see Dante so low. Well, turns out when you don't have double scatty, he's not good at all. He's pretty bad actually. Still not useless, but I would not recommend using him. The fact that we do not have any good alternative quick supports also doesn't help. If we eventually get good quick supports that's not a limited 5-star, then maybe I'll be able to place him higher. About Moriarty, he got a buff in JP, a very strong one, but I'm not sure if it's enough to push him on S tier. For now, I will hesitate and place him on A+. Nidocris just came out. She seems pretty good, but I think she's not quite there with the other two arts loopers. But with more testing, maybe I'll change my mind. Comment for the Moon Cancers. So, my opinion, the best DPS Moon Cancer is BB Summer. Now, you might be wondering why is she lower than the others then, if she's the best DPS. That's because I think Moon Cancer is not a good class to DPS with, so you would prefer to have more support and tankiness and utility instead of higher DPS numbers. But if you're thinking of grailing a Moon Cancer just for their DPS potential, I do think BB Summer is better than the rest. I want to also comment on Qin Shi Huan. I think the community has the wrong perspective on his gameplay. Most people will tell you he's great at solos and his role is just that of a soloer. I don't agree. Even though his solos are good, they are more situational, and you have way better soloers like Tyra and many others in other classes. His best potential is within a team, to be able to tank for a team, debuff the enemies, and also deal good damage himself if he manages to get some crits in. He is S+ because I do think he is really good at supporting any type of team. And finally, even though these two are not out in an A yet, because I'm so confident of their placement, I'm gonna go ahead and place them right now. They are both EX tier, both insane. I think Edmond Dantes, the new Edmond Dantes, is quite possibly the best single target DPS in the entire game. That's how ridiculous he is. And Beast Draco, her abilities are not amazing, but her class is ridiculous. She can resist all of the base classes, which is insane. She also has bonus damage against the base classes. So basically, she's a ruler that has Berserker damage, or if you want to look at it from the opposite perspective, she is a Berserker with ruler tankiness, which is insane. Like, she can carry you the whole way through the story. Alright, I think that's everything for Extra 1. Moving on to Extra 2. And right away you will see a lot of servants in X tier. I know that's a lot of them. But honestly, I've thought about moving any one of them down to S+, and it doesn't feel right. I think all of them deserve the EX tier spot. Not a lot to say about this one. I think Koyan Dark needs a buff. I think when the developers designed her, they thought she would be S+ or EX. She's good, but she's not that good. If she needs a buff. I want to comment on Molay because I'm sure some people would disagree that she shouldn't be so high up. The thing is, I once again think the community has a bit of a wrong perspective on her strategy. Most people would use her as a main DPS, Her damage is not terrible, but I don't think she is main DPS worthy. Instead, what you're supposed to do, or what I think her best case scenario is to use her as half DPS, half support, because she does have a lot of support utility actually. Provides a lot of team damage buffs, attack up, crit damage, NP gain for the team, invincible for the team, and generates a lot of crit stars. So she's pretty good as a half DPS, half support. I also want to comment on King Prodea. I think she's a little bit underrated. She can tank very well in any boss fight because of her constant HP stacking and NP damage resist. And sometimes that's enough to even break some fights. You can tank some hits you are not even supposed to be able to tank. So she's very powerful. And finally, since she is coming out soon, I will play Skullcam. I'm pretty confident she's the X tier, very powerful abilities, very powerful passives, the most powerful in the game, I would even say, in terms of passives. And NP pretty strong as well. Triple Buster is great for what she is trying to do. So yeah, I'm pretty sure she will end up in EX tier. And that's it. That's all of the servants. That took a while, but we got here. We'll go over the tier list just one more time in case anyone is skipping ahead. Saber, Archer, Lancer, Rider, Caster, Assassin, Berserker, Extra 1, and Extra 2. Thank you for watching. I will stop playing this game, but I've enjoyed my time and hope you will too as well.